Haley. Claire is here tonight with us. She is a actor, a singer, a voiceover artist, a dancer. She is pretty much I'm not sure. A lot of threat, big threat.
Really super threatening. I'm the most threatening.
Yes. So before we get started, let's go through some a few little housekeeping things. So I'm going to be looking up and down. It's not because I'm not looking at you, Haley, or everyone there. I'm just looking at my other screen for some questions and things. But welcome to Strictly Speaking, Conversation with Theater Makers. My name is Joshua Reaves. I'm the Director of University Theater at NC State. This is our second webinar ever. So as with everything we are doing now in this world, we're kind of figuring it out as we go and making it up as we go. So as you know, if we hit a few bumps tonight, just remember they're happy little accidents. And this is supposed to be a casual, we want to hear from the people that are out there actually making art, making things happen. And Haley is one of those people. So utilize that Q&A down below. I see that some of y'all are already started on the chat. Hello from Boston. I see we got some Bostonites here, and that's great. But yeah, take a moment to familiarize yourself with Zoom if you haven't already. We do have a Q&A at the bottom, and then we also have the chat. So please make sure. Oh, California. So make sure you ask questions as we go. Interrupt me as you go with the chat, and we can make sure we get your questions answered. So Haley, I see you're coming. You're speaking from what looks like a booth right now. Can you tell me a bit about what are you sitting in? What is that?
This right now, I'm sitting in my voiceover booth. I actually built this booth in my closet with my husband Nathan. We took an entire weekend and we assembled the sound panels and attached them to make everything sound really good. You always want a really nice dry sound for voiceover, no sound bleed through. And I'm talking into my mic. This is very bad mic etiquette right now. Usually the mic is right in front of my face when I'm recording, but I also know that we're speaking here and I wanted to be able to say hello to you. And so the mic is off to the side at the moment, so that I can also talk to you guys with the camera.
So, okay. So when you say dry, you just said you want the sound to be dry and no interference. Could you speak to us a bit about what you mean by dry sound?
Yeah. So a sound is you basically don't want sound to travel or bounce and come back at you. So in assembling a booth, and I can touch on this a little bit because home booths are now a very much more necessary thing post-COVID. I used to be able to go into New York City to be able to do all of my recording sessions. And now I'm doing all of those same recording sessions at broadcast quality in my own home studio. And so I need to make sure that the sound is not bleeding, that I'm not getting bleed through from other sounds in the house or outside. But on the contrast, a very live sound, for example, would be like if you're in the bathroom or in a church and you get all of that bounce back and all of that echo. That's a very live sound condition, and you don't want that for recording for voiceover. So that's why we build a voiceover booth.
Just kidding. I'm trying to use Zoom correctly. Thank you very much, Haley. Again, everyone, make sure you're asking questions as we go. So Haley, you talked about like going into New York City. So, I know you're not just a voiceover artist, but I do want to touch on that quite a bit tonight. Could you tell us what is a voiceover artist and what does that mean to you? What does it actually mean to be a voiceover artist?
Well, I love being a voiceover artist. First of all, I love my job. It also basically means I get paid to talk for a living, which is like the best thing ever because I love talking. Basically, being a voiceover artist is what you hear in any recorded medium. You'll hear voiceover in commercials. You'll hear the voice talking, even though there's nobody on screen. That is a voiceover artist. In animation, all the people who are voicing the characters in a cartoon, those are voiceover artists. An audiobook narrator that you might listen to for a book on tape, that is a voiceover artist. So there are many different genres of voiceover, but that is what a voiceover artist is, and that is what I do. You're muted again, Josh.
I'm the worst voiceover artist. So yeah, could you take us through a typical day? Like what would be a typical day? Let's say pre-COVID. You know, for a voiceover artist, how would you start your day?
Pre-COVID? Well, the thing is, as a voiceover artist, you know, you're a freelance artist, and so your days can vary dramatically. There are days where I have nothing going on, and that's just my day. And then there's another day where pre-COVID, I would have to go into the city, I would record an audition, I would then go to a different part of the city for a booking, for an actual recording session, for a job. And it varies a lot. Now, post-COVID, I'm doing all of that stuff from home in my booth, which is really convenient. But so I'm recording all of my auditions right here on this microphone, and I'm doing my sessions in here as well. And I now have some software that I had to download when COVID hit, which is called Source Connect, and that allows me to connect to a studio anywhere in the world, and they can record me in their studio from my microphone.
Yeah, so we just had Lindsay ask, what type of technology, mic, and software do you use? So essentially, the software, it sounds like you're just streaming it to a full studio elsewhere. Is that like...
Yes, well, like it varies again. And hi, Lindsay. So the mic that I have is the AKG P420. That is the specific microphone model that I use. There are a lot of different microphones, especially as you're getting started. You do not need to spend a ton of money on tech and setup. You know, you want to make small investments so that you can book the job and then eventually work your way up to make bigger investments on nicer stuff. Don't go drop thousands of dollars, you know, on your first ever studio. You don't need to do that. But so I love the AKG, but also Audio-Technica is another really popular brand, and Rode is another very popular brand for microphones. And I also have an audio interface, which you guys can't see because it's down here, but that's what my microphone plugs into, and that plugs into my computer.
So in terms of the sound engineering and editing and mastering, you don't have any part in that. That seems like that's part of the studio. Or
I have had to, you know, voiceover artists have had to become more and more hands-on with that kind of stuff. As we're working from home, people are asking us kind of to do more and more. And so, you know, that's part of the learning curve as you enter voiceover, is learning, you know, your software. Sometimes I do record on my own if I'm not using Source Connect for a live directed session and somebody else is recording me in a studio. That's the most convenient, and I love those sessions because I really don't have to do anything. But sometimes, you know, they'll just send me the script and say, can you record this on your own software? I personally use the Adobe Audition software. It's very inexpensive. I pay a monthly fee to Adobe in order to use that software. A lot of people also like Audacity. A lot of people use Pro Tools. There's a bunch of different software platforms you can use for recording, but I really like Adobe Audition. And so sometimes I'll record on my end, and then I have to send them the files with several take options for them.
Awesome. I hope that helped answer your question, Hannah. And you know, Hannah did ask, you know, was it difficult learning that stuff? I mean, did you come into it knowing the software, or did you kind of pick it up as you went?
I sure didn't. When I started doing this about 5 years ago, 5 or 6, and I was just using GarageBand, and a lot of people still do use GarageBand. And I had, you know, a cheap $20 USB microphone that I bought on Amazon, and that was my setup for the longest time. And it's a learning curve the same way you would learn any new software. You know, if you're, it's like moving from a Mac to PC or something like that, or vice versa. Get a new iPhone because you had an Android, and you've got to figure out all that stuff. It's a very similar process, and eventually it becomes second nature.
Yeah. Okay. So got a couple of questions. Faith and Gavin are asking, how did you get into voiceover? I mean, I see, you have a BFA from Boston Conservatory in acting.
In musical theater.
Musical theater, excuse me. And we'll get to that musical party here shortly. But how did you start off with voiceover?
Well, like I just said, I come from a musical theater background. Broadway has always been and still is my dream. But I actually came to a point in my career where I was dealing with some medical issues with my feet. I'm a dancer, and I had to actually get several orthopedic surgeries done in order to fix a hereditary issue. And so I had to basically take 2 years off from my performing career. And I thought, like, well, I'm not just going to like sit at home and do nothing. That would be so boring and I would die. But while I can't perform, I have to be on crutches and whatever else for these next 2 years. I can still talk, and I love to talk. So I started taking classes. And I can recommend several classes. I highly recommend Actors Connection. It's based in New York City, but hey, one of the benefits of COVID is that you can actually take these classes from anywhere now because everything is virtual. One-on-One also has some great classes and teachers. And now people are just teaching Zoom classes. You can kind of, I don't know, where else to necessarily find them other than joining voiceover Facebook groups where people post. But I just started taking classes, class after class after class. And I actually ended up treating it a little bit like a grad school situation because I didn't have plans to go to grad school, but I kind of considered this like getting a second degree in voiceover by taking all of these various classes. And through those classes, I was able to do some networking, and that's how I met my first agents and started working with them fairly early on. I don't still work with those agents that I found originally. I now work exclusively with one agent. I'm signed with DDO Artists Agency. And that's how I started working. They started sending me on auditions, and that's that.
All right. So we got a couple of questions here. I think these kind of combine these two. One question is, where do you start when it comes to making a voiceover reel? And the other one was, how do I create my first voiceover reel?
Yes. Okay. Voiceover reels are, in fact, a slightly loaded question because you don't want to make your reel too soon. You don't want to go just say, I want to do voiceover. I have to make a reel. Reels are very expensive. If you go to somebody to actually get them done properly, they can cost you anywhere from the range of $800 to $1,500. Somebody who's charging more than that is probably overcharging. But they're expensive. It is an investment. And so you don't want to just drop that money before you really know what you're doing, because then it becomes a poor representation of you once you start working and you really start to get a handle on things. So I recommend actually waiting on getting your demo reel made until you feel it is holding you back not to have it. So I started doing work and I started taking classes and meeting people and going to auditions without a reel for at least the first year. And it was at that point where I started meeting with agents that I decided, okay, now I'm meeting with agents. They want to hear my reel. I need to get a reel. And so I just told them, oh yeah, I'm making it. I'm in the process. And then I found somebody and got my reel made.
Awesome. Well, speaking of, let's take a listen to yours. You have a Haley Clair commercial demo.
Get to Kohl's for a home refresh with an extra 20 or 15% off. Plus, save even more on your home purchase. Save on the Ninja Foodie Grill, the Shark IQ Robot Vacuum, and on Columbia and Serta. Plus, get Kohl's Cash. Kohl's home sale at Kohl's and Kohl's.com.
I'm going to jump ahead a little bit so we don't have to sit through 2 minutes of this. That's okay. Is there one that you really like, Blistex or Spotify or Cupid?
Actually, the one that was coming up very next is Michael's, and I do like that one. That's a very recent spot.
Let's do that.
No matter what or why you make us more than yarn, paper, and canvas. You make us Michaels, made by you. Moisture. For lips, it's fundamental. But for Blistex, it's just the beginning. Enhanced moisturization, plus a twist. For super softness, for anti-aging, for revitalization. Take your lips from blah to Blistex with the Blistex Enhancement Series.
So I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So in those reels right there, or those demos, voiceovers, how many times did it take? How many takes did you do for those? And do you have the music behind it? Do you hear the music, or is it you're doing it dry and just sending it off?
It totally varies from client to client. Those spots that we just heard were all with the exception of Michael's. I did Michael's post-COVID in my home booth. But some of those other spots that you just heard, I recorded in a studio. And it totally varies client to client. Some clients are awesome and they're super easy, and you give them 3 takes and they're like, awesome, we got it. That was great. And some clients want to nitpick you for, 2 hours, and you go through the whole thing 20 times, and then they want to take it each line by line and dissect, different pieces of the line and get multiple takes of different words. And so it really depends on how hands-on the client is being.
And, say a typical, and I'm sure there's not a typical session, but how long are your sessions, in a given, how long do you sit behind the mic?
If I'm recording on my own, without a live director in my headphones, maybe a half an hour. If I am in a live session, they usually book me anywhere for an hour to. I was supposed to have a session today that was 4 hours, and the client ended up canceling 1 hour before because they wanted to completely rethink their whole campaign. But oftentimes it's not uncommon for people to overbook the time to make sure that they at least have you for that amount of time, but then you finish it in 40 minutes, and technically you're booked for 3 hours, but you don't really use that whole time.
Yeah.
And other times I will spend an hour recording with a client, and they'll say, okay, can you just stand by? We're going to cut these to picture and send them to the client for approval. Because oftentimes I'm actually working with an ad agency who's producing the ad.
So you just said cut to picture. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. So I'm recording the audio, and oftentimes if it's a TV commercial, they have to apply the audio of their favorite takes and make sure it all aligns with whatever they want the audio to align with on the picture, on the visual that you're seeing for the TV commercial, to make sure it all fits in time and all of that. So that's what it means cutting it to picture. And then they will submit it to the higher ups at the company, whatever client we're working for approval. And I often have to just kind of hang out, and then maybe they'll come back and say, hey, the client really wanted us to emphasize this one word, so we're gonna have to re-record this one line.
Cool. So, we just looked at one of your demos. It has Kohl's, Michael's, Blistex, David's Bridal, Spotify, Cupid, Breathe Right. And I know there's many more you've done. I got a question from Hannah here. Did you start with big national brands that you voice over for, or did you start small and local?
No, I started very small, very local. Probably got taken advantage of in the payment department for a little while. A lot of people, when they're starting out, you kind of accept these jobs they pay pennies, because you're just I got my first job. But when I started out, before I had my representation, I was submitting on pay-to-play sites, and I can recommend the 2 big ones, which are voices.com and voice123.com. Those are the 2 big pay-to-play sites. And what do I mean by pay-to-play? You pay a membership fee for an annual membership, and that grants you access to audition for any of the clients that are on that platform. You can submit your own auditions for yourself. And while the membership fees can be kind of steep, usually they will pay for themselves within anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 jobs, depending on the rates that you're charging for yourself.
Well, of these, 7 that I mentioned and many more, Clara asked, what was your favorite project that you were able to work on?
Oh gosh. There's a few that I, have loved. I adore Kohl's. I've been the voice of Kohl's now for 2 years, and they are just an awesome client. They are so cool to work with. They are so easygoing. And because I see them the most regularly, I work with them almost weekly. We have a really great rapport, and we're kind of friends now. So it's just a really enjoyable project that I get to do. I'm trying to think if there's anybody else. There are really no jobs that I truly disliked. Sometimes there will be a difficult client, and I'm like, okay, that was exhausting. But for the most part, I have a lot of fun in almost all of my sessions.
Cool. And so when you say you almost record weekly for Kohl's, what do you mean by that? Like, I mean, I know they do a lot of sales, and they end up, having to update their commercials quite often. So is it literally like you get the script the week of or the day of? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, I usually get the scripts either the day of or a day before. I don't typically look at them ahead of time because with voiceover, you just have to read. It's not like regular acting where you have to memorize your lines. And in fact, it's better if you don't memorize it because they want you to be flexible. You don't want to get a certain intonation stuck in your head, so that if they say, actually, can we emphasize this other line a little bit more than this one or whatever, you can change up your read a little bit.
So speaking of, I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in real quick. Yeah. So Caleb was just asked, how do you decide the quality of your voice for a particular project, and how do you differentiate them from other projects? So it sounds like, with them not wanting you to get a certain intonation, how do you decide those qualities?
Well, usually, especially in an audition, and if the casting director who sends that audition is worth their salt, they will send a breakdown with a clear description of the energy, the vibe, the character type that they're looking for. So they'll say, we want, the girl next door, or the best friend who tells it to you like it is and really rolls off the cuff and has a dry sense of humor. Or they'll say upbeat or really kind of underspoken. They want something that, has no smile and it's just very direct, or there's the, hey, hi, how's it going? I think you should check this out. So usually that's indicated in the breakdown for the audition. Sometimes it isn't, and you just guess at what they want. And sometimes you're totally wrong. And if you get it totally wrong, you just don't get that job.
So Mary Wells asked, and I know this is probably a little, I'm not sure how to ask this, but do you feel confident in your voice? Like, do you feel like you've got the voice for what you need to do?
Yes, I do. And I think the reason for that is that I've come to understand exactly what my sort of niche is in the voiceover world. I know that I am like your girl next door, your millennial best friend, the sort of casual, conversational, supernatural type. I'm not really going to be going in for like your pharmaceuticals because those are typically being marketed towards, the over 40 or over 50 group. And they want somebody who sounds a little bit more mature and a little bit, and I can manipulate my voice to make it sound a little bit more put together than I normally talk. But overall, I do feel confident simply because I know exactly what my strengths are. And when I get an audition and I read the breakdown and I'm like, oh, I know that girl. Like, I know exactly what they're looking for. I can give you that.
So, okay, so an audition, how do you prepare? Well, two part. Amelia is asking, how do you prepare for a voiceover audition? But also, a lot of our viewers are actors and dancers or singers. How does one audition for a voiceover?
I love auditions for voiceover. They take all of about 10 minutes and I don't have to prepare at all. And usually that's because you get the scripts immediately, at the time you're auditioning. Or, I'll get an email from my agent that says like, hey, this audition is due by 9 a.m. tomorrow. And so you have 24 hours or whatever just to record it and turn it in. And, it's you just sort of read it. You open up the copy, you kind of give it a scan and get a sense of what they're looking for. And you just read it through several times. You pick your favorite 2 takes and you send it.
So Jaden asked, do you prefer voice acting over acting and dancing? And if so, why?
That's a tricky question, especially right now. I mean, right now I'm super grateful for voiceover because I've been able to continue to work. I am hurting so badly for all of my friends who were working in the theater before this, and now they're kind of out of luck and they're not really sure what to do. So for that reason, I'm very grateful for voiceover. They're totally different to me because with voiceover, it's to me, it's very simple. It's easy. It's natural. I don't have to work so hard. And I think my favorite aspect about it is that what I look like does not matter. And so to me, that takes so much pressure off of it. Whereas you show up to a musical theater audition and you've got your lashes and your face is beat and you've got the hair curled and you've picked out your dress and you've picked out your book and your music. And So it's just a little more stressful for me. But when it comes to actually performing, when I'm actually on stage, not auditioning, it's like, I mean, of course, it just fills the soul. It's like one of the most joyful things in the world. And so they're just very different experiences to me. One is very calm and natural and simple. And the other, well, it takes, in my opinion, a lot more, effort and preparation and, just energy. It also just fills up the soul in a totally different way.
Yeah, no, I get the whole like having to prepare because like I'm wearing gym shorts underneath this collared shirt, so it's a different world right now. So I'm kind of seeing you there. So I got a question from Haley. Are all of your jobs easy to manage in your schedule?
Hey, Haley, nice name. For the most part, yes. Basically, when somebody offers me a job, they will ask me to put a hold on a certain date that they're looking or hoping to record. So I'm holding that date. If something comes up for that date, I reach out to that client and say, hey, somebody else is looking to book me at that time. Are we going ahead with a booking here? And I can just tell them I'm not available. And that's kind of how it works. It's just you're just really, you have to be very firm and yet open about your availability. And that is also the tricky thing, is that as a freelancer, your job is to be available all the time. So my husband and I will get into it a little bit, because it's like, well, we want to go away for a vacation, and I'm like, but I'm supposed to be available. And so then I just have to be really firm and say, you know what, I'm not available this week. I do have a travel setup now that I can take with me, and I can sometimes record on the road. I do actually have some very funny stories about when auditions and things have come in when we're on the road before I had this setup. I think the funniest audition I've ever recorded was when we were road tripping through the Nevada desert. I got an email from my agent urging me I had to get this audition in the next 2 hours. And I was like, I'm literally in the Nevada desert. We pulled off the side of the road. It was 105 degrees. I covered my head in a sheet, and I recorded into the inline microphone on my earbuds. It also happened to be my birthday that day. I didn't book it, but that was probably my funniest audition story to date.
I remember you telling me about that last time you were here. So, so your agent, speaking of your agent, Lindsay asked, do you find jobs on those sites you mentioned, or are you mostly getting auditions through your agents? Also, do you find auditions on Actors Access or Backstage?
Great question. I get most of my auditions, and especially the higher profile auditions, those broadcast national TV spots, those come through my agent. However, the pay-to-play sites are great for kind of filling, a padding. I've started auditioning a lot for what we call industrials, which are like video presentations that corporations show at meetings, or somebody's hosting a fundraiser and they want to play an inspirational video for whatever the charity is that they're fundraising for, and so it's kind of narrating that video. It's those kinds of jobs that I've been seeing a lot on those pay-to-play sites, but there are also commercials. A lot of radio spots audition on those sites. It really varies. But so it's usually the smaller padding jobs that I get on those pay-to-play sites, and I'll get the bigger stuff, the more national scale stuff from my agent.
Gotcha. And then I assume you started off more with those pay-to-play or the local stuff before having an agent. At what point did you bring an agent on? Did you hire an agent?
Well, I was very lucky in that I had agent interest fairly early on in my career. Not everybody has that. And so a lot of people start doing the pay-to-play. There's also a whole realm of direct marketing, which I am not an expert in, pretty much because I was so lucky to get an agent early on. But direct marketing is where you reach out directly to a client, directly to ad agencies or production companies, and ask them if they keep their own roster and try to get hired directly by the client without going through a middleman. But that takes a lot of research, because you have to find their contact info and you have to type up the business email and send off your stuff, Be
an agent, basically. Yeah. Caleb asks, in regards to being firm and recording from home, how do you decide your rates, and how does that differ from working with a studio?
Well, Know your worth. That's the biggest takeaway from that is don't undercut yourself and don't undersell yourself, because when you undersell yourself, you're basically underselling the whole voiceover community. If somebody is willing to take a job for $100 when the actual national standard is more like $1,000, then of course the client is going to want to pay less if they can. But there's one tool that I use that is very useful. It is called the GVAA rate guide.
GVAA?
Yes, GVAA rate guide. You can Google that and it'll come right up. And it basically is a breakdown of national standard rates for any and all types of voiceover work. And so I use that all the time.
Awesome. Thank you. And I'm sure our attendees are glad to see that. This is the
Mhm.
kind of stuff that we want, to get out there.
Yeah, of course.
So Hannah asked, do you ever find your singing talents come in handy for voiceover? And before you answer that, I do want to play a little clip of one of your performance clips, if I
Sure.
could. All right. I'm going to start a little halfway through it, so we'll see where we get. Here we go.
All right.
Or not. Sure. Here we go. Yeah.
Where the wind don't change and nothing on the ground can ever grow. No, just lies and you're taught to cry in your pillow. But I survived. I'm still breathing. I'm still breathing. I'm still breathing. I'm still breathing. I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm alive.
Oh. I was gonna fade it out. Oh. So first off, let's just acknowledge it's terrible and hard to see yourself, right? Like, ugh. Maybe you love it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've
I've kind of gotten used to it. I'm fairly neutral about hearing myself. Simply, actually, from voiceover, I'm just so used to hearing myself now.
Awesome. Yeah. So tell us, do you find, has any of your training or your experience as a singer helped you or aided you in voiceover work?
100%, 100,000%. I think actually that is what kind of allowed me to launch rather quickly. And I don't say that that's not supposed to be like braggy. It's just that I was really able to kind of get my feet off the ground early on, because as a singer, I was already trained in voice placement and how to manipulate sound effectively and efficiently, how to use my chest voice to pull things down, how to go up into my mask and make things sound really ridiculous. So in understanding vocal placement, how to place something forward versus pulling it back in your mouth, all of that is extremely useful in voiceover because it helps to brighten or deepen the sound depending on what the client is looking for. And one trick that I, learned early on was if you are saying a product name, you want to try to bring that forward in your placement a little bit, just to kind of give it that extra sparkle because it's the brand name, and so those types of skills, which I already knew from singing, were extremely helpful in being able to manipulate the text a little bit for, whatever the interest that was trying to be served by the commercial.
Awesome. Well, and we've got somebody saying yes to that song. They asked, are you still singing with an a cappella group? Can you tell us about Stilettas?
Yes, absolutely. I sing with an all-female a cappella group called Stiletta, Stiletta. We are an all-female pop sextet, and we really focus on pop. Our genre is very kind of top 40, and I've been singing with them pretty much since the year I moved to New York City, which was 2013. And they have just been my lifesaver, my godsend. That group kind of fell into my lap a little bit because one of their original members was leaving the group to go on a cruise ship job. She booked a cruise ship, and one of my friends was booked on the same cruise ship. and reached out to me and said, hey, this girl just left this group and they're looking for somebody that sounds, I think, a lot like you. So that's how I got in touch with Stiletta, and they have just become like my sisters. Like, we are so tight, and we have performed now all over the country. We competed in the Harmony Sweepstakes, the National Harmony Sweepstakes. First, we won the New York Regional, which sent us to the Nationals in 2016, where we took home the national title, which was super exciting. And from then on, we've headlined various festivals. Actually, just last year, we performed in North Carolina. We were in Raleigh, and we performed at the So Jam Festival. I was so glad that came to me. So we performed at the So Jam Acapella Festival, and shortly after that, we also performed in Ohio and headlined the Kettering National Acapella Festival. So it's been quite a ride with them, and we do have some recordings out. We might even be working on something right now.
And can you tell us about that? It sounds like
I'm not sure, actually. We haven't discussed in the group whether or not we're being tight-lipped about it. So to play it safe, just know that something might be coming. But we also do have a recording out on all of the streaming sites for music: Spotify, Amazon Music, iTunes, wherever else you listen.
Well, I just put Haley's website in the chat. So, and from there, I know you can see some of the performance clips. Will show some of the group's work as well. So check that out when you get a chance. So we got another question. Hannah asks, for those of us who are going to join a pay-to-play site, how do we go about marketing ourselves? Every site asks you, describe your voice. What the heck do I write?
Part of that is just kind of learning popular buzzwords. Popular buzzwords are natural, conversational, talking to a friend. Those three descriptors are in almost every single commercial breakdown I've ever seen ever. Warm. But it's really just learning about tone. I think you can go to my website and see that on my under my voiceover tab, there are several descriptors that I say. So it's warm, textured. Texture is a way to describe either like a smoky voice or vocal fry, which I have a little bit of because I come from California. Millennial, if that's your genre or your age, you can kind of list your kind of age group a little bit to give them an idea of what demographics you might market towards. All that kind. I mean, you can really kind of say anything that you think they might be looking for, as long as you actually feel it resonates with how you sound. You do want to accurately describe your voice. You don't want to say, I don't know, something totally random that doesn't represent who you are. But you could say quirky. And then I also kind of break down some of the character types that I feel I could play: the sarcastic best friend, the, person you can confide in, the tell it like it is person. And I have these listed much more eloquently on my website.
Well, Hannah also asks, do you find that you are the voiceover for many of your clients, or are you on a internal list, or do they utilize you sometimes, or is there a group that you're working with?
It is often it's a rare and very lucky thing to become the actual voice of a company. I have been the voice of Kohl's for 2 years, and that is kind of like the treasure trove of jobs that you want to get to have that kind of a recurring relationship. I'm starting to form a slightly recurring relationship with Michaels. In the past, I was the voice of David's Bridal, but then they decided to move on and change their campaign a little bit, and so they went and they found a new voice. And that happens. Usually when you're the voice of a company, it does have a shelf life because inevitably they're going to want to change direction one day and take a different tone. But so those are great. Oftentimes though, my jobs are one-offs is what I call them, where you do one commercial and that runs for maybe a year or two. And that's that. Yeah. But the goal is always to have clients who will come back to you, because that's what builds a career.
Of course. Yeah. And so with knowing that there are others out there, other voiceover artists that you may, I don't want to say compete with, but you at least work, as colleagues. Do you have a voiceover artist role model that you really look up to? Noelle would like to know.
A role model, like, well, the thing is, in the voiceover community, it's a rather small and slightly tight-knit community. I'm in a Facebook page for all, like, the voiceover actors of New York City, and you kind of get to know each other before COVID when we actually went to auditions in person, and you would kind of see the same faces at most of the auditions because, you know, there's only so many, you know, millennial girls who look and sound like me and about my age group in the voiceover community. And so you kind of get to know each other that way. I also met several friends and mentors in classes that I took, people who have been doing this a lot longer. One woman who's becoming quite the influence in the voiceover community is Karin Gilfrey. She's a friend of mine. I have worked with her before. And she's the one who actually started this Voice Actors of NYC Facebook group that has grown and kind of created this amazing community. And the thing that I love about the voiceover community is that it's just so cool and it's down to earth. And you just kind of understand that it's not super competitive. It's not cutthroat, because you just know that they're either looking for somebody that sounds like you or somebody that sounds like me. And that's it. You sound different than I do. So they want something specific, and it might be one of us and it might not be.
Well, that's how it is with every audition, though, right? So, how do you typically get paid per hour, or like per session, per royalties? Like, how does that stuff work?
Oh, it's just the best. I love talking about this stuff. I also want to, side note, I want to take the stigma away from artists making money. You do not have to be starving and you do not have to be poor in order to be an artist. You can find ways to make money doing things that you love, and it should not be something to be ashamed of. Anyway, that was me on my soapbox. I'm getting off now. How payment breaks down in voiceover. There's union and non-union, and the payment is different for both. I am non-union, but I have done one union gig. I don't have to join the union having done that one gig. You can pass a couple of times. I think you can take 2 or 3 gigs union. For non-union, there's usually 2 different payment fees. One is the session fee. They pay you for the amount of time that you are in the session working. Then in addition to that, there is the use fee, where they buy out the rights to use your voice for a certain amount of time. A word of, from the wise to somebody who's new: in perpetuity is never your friend. Because that means they have the right to use your voice forever. And sometimes that can come up as a conflict with something that is similar. So you get paid the session fee. Usually, the price range for that, depending on the company, depending on the brand, depending on how long they want to book you for, can range from $200 to $600 for the session fee. The usage is really where you make your money, is because they're paying for the right to use your voice in that commercial for about a year or 2 years, whatever the contract length is. And that can, that goes up from $500 to thousands of dollars. In the union world, they work with SAG rates. SAG scale is kind of like the baseline. And then it goes up from there, and then you get residuals. That's where residuals come in, is with SAG or union spots, because you get paid a certain residual rate for every time that the spot airs. And those residual checks are really fun because it's just like a really fun surprise in the mail.
So Lori asks, well, first off, was Cole's a union gig or a non-union?
Cole's is in fact non-union. There are a lot you'd be surprised at how many big national spots are now non-union.
Well, Lori says it's interesting that the national commercial Cole's wouldn't be a union job. Can you tell us more about that, or your thoughts on that?
Well, I know that once upon a time, Cole's, a former voice of Cole's, was union, and it used to be a union gig. The way that the economy has gone, many companies have moved from union casting to non-union because it saves them money. That's basically the basis of it. It's not great for union actors because if you actually join the union, you are no longer allowed to work non-union. And so it just kind of means there are fewer jobs available, even if the jobs that you are getting are much higher paying. The union jobs pay tons more, and you get residuals forever and ever, or at least as long as the spot airs. So yeah, it varies from client to client, who, you know, if they're trying to save money and cut costs, or if they really want to just like go for the upper echelon of union talent.
Great, thank you. Cynthia, I hope that answered your question about, Cynthia Williams is on. She too is in the union, and said that, noticed that many more non-union jobs than union jobs, and just asked why was that. So it's,
Yeah.
sounds like you got that. Let's see here. You said something earlier about conflicts, like if you were in perpetuity and you might have conflicts that show up. As I was looking at your resume, your voiceover section doesn't really speak about what you've done, but more about conflicts upon request. What does that mean? What does that mean?
Well, this is strictly something that happens in the commercial world. It's only a commercial issue, but commercials are where I do most of my work. But a conflict is basically like if I've worked for McDonald's, I can't go do a spot for Burger King. Or if I do a cell phone commercial for Verizon, I'm now in conflict with any and all other cell phone or mobile companies. So any job that you do, that you list, like people don't really have voiceover resumes. I think some people do, especially if you're doing animation stuff, then totally list all your work. The more work you have, the better. But with commercials, every job that you list could be in conflict with another job. So you don't really want to advertise all the things that you can't do.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So we're getting close to the end. We're gonna end here around 6:55. I got a couple more questions. One from a while back when we were discussing your equipment, Caleb, and actually Dave just jumped in asking a question about technology. Caleb asked, how does an audio interface aid your recording process? You mentioned the interface down below.
And then I actually see David, he wanted me to tell you my mic make and model again. I use the AKG P420. AKG makes a bunch of other microphones as well in various price ranges. And I also recommend Audio-Technica as a brand and Rode as a brand. Those three brands will make slightly more affordable models for somebody who is starting out. There are other companies and those price ranges just start a lot higher. Yes. Okay. So how does an interface help me? So I'm recording on what we call an XLR mic. It has an XLR cable, which does not plug directly into my computer. A lot of people will want to start off using like a USB mic, which is a microphone that has a USB cable at the end. It plugs straight into your computer. They're a lot cheaper, and the sound quality reflects that. So especially now that people are having to, you know, this is something that's in the COVID world. When I'm auditioning now, I'm not just auditioning my voice, I'm auditioning my setup and my sound quality, because they expect you to do the job on the same thing that you recorded your audition on. That's a new thing. That's just post-COVID. So I don't think that a USB mic could necessarily cut it anymore, but by all means try. Like I used a USB for years before I upgraded to an XLR mic. But so the XLR cable plugs into the interface, and the interface helps me to control my input level, how loudly or softly the recording goes into the computer in the software. And basically it translates the signal that the microphone picks up. It translates that into a language that the computer can understand. So the interface, that's what the interface does. And you can control your levels with the interface that way as well.
Awesome. You mentioned animation. Have you done animation? And if not, or if so, what have you done? And if not, do you hope to ever do animation from the web?
I did, and I do. I just, like last week, did my first animated gig. I did a video game, which I'm not at liberty to talk about because I signed an NDA. But you can just know that I did my first video game. And whenever it is actually released to the public, then I will be able to tell you all what I've done. So that's very exciting for me because I do want to break into animation. I have focused on commercials up till now simply because that's what I was really good at. That's what was accessible to me, and they pay really well. Other genres that people find a lot of interest in are audiobooks. I've never done audiobooks, but I do have a friend who has successfully jumped into that pool recently. She's kind of launched her audiobook narration career since COVID began. So it's just a very different world, and I don't have so much experience there. But I do totally want to do animation, and that just sounds like so much fun. My dream is to be a Disney princess or a villain.
Well, there you go. So we also have Clara Livingston. They're asking, how have you been interested in theater, singing, dancer ever since you were really young? And I noticed that your first role was at age 6. You were a munchkin in The Wizard of Oz.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was children's theater, 6 years old. My parents, I was singing and dancing all over the house, so they stuck me in The Wizard of Oz, and I was a munchkin in the Lullaby League at 6 years old. And that was my first ever role. So yes, I've been singing, dancing, and dreaming of the theaters since basically the womb.
Awesome. Grayson asked, with those conflicts you spoke about, are those formal agreements that you cannot work with some companies, or is it more like an understood thing?
It depends on the level of the job that you're working at. In union jobs, it is a hard legal conflict. You can get into big trouble if they find out that you had a conflict that you were not open about. And in general, as the voice of Kohl's, it's just sort of understood that I don't go in for Macy's or JCPenney or Target auditions because Kohl's would just be like, look, we can't use you anymore because now you're the voice of our biggest competitor. So while I don't exactly have a legal conflict with Kohl's, it's just understood. And it's kind of just because I have such a good rapport with them and it's such a great job for me, I don't want to jeopardize that. So I'm not trying to put my own foot in my mouth,
Yeah. So, and we got a couple of questions that I find that young artists are always interested in learning. One of them from Lindsay: do you work mostly 1099s or W-2s? And Hannah asked, does someone do your taxes? This sounds like a paperwork nightmare.
It's horrible. Taxes are awful. And yes, we do go to see somebody, and specifically somebody who specializes in actor taxes, because there are certain write-offs that actors can take that nobody else knows about, especially as a freelancer. So we do go get our taxes done. But it takes so much preparation gathering all of my 1099s together. I will occasionally get a W-2, but it's pretty rare. For pretty much 85% of my jobs, I'm on 1099s. And I take out, because of that, when you work on a 1099, they don't take taxes out for you when you get paid. So I have a separate savings account so that every time I get paid, I just automatically take out 20% and I put it in my savings and I save that for taxes. And we pay quarterly taxes as well so that it doesn't hurt so badly at the end of the year.
That's a smart move. Yes.
So I take out that 20%, I put it in a savings, we pay quarterly taxes, and we go see somebody to do our taxes who specializes in performing arts and actor taxes, because of all the the crazy write-offs. I can write off totally legally all of my video streaming memberships, my subscriptions, because I have to do research. I have to watch animation. If I'm studying animation, I have to watch commercials. If I'm going to be in commercials, I have to watch TV if I want to act on TV. So yeah. Taxes.
Got one question here, and we're getting close to the end of our session, but can someone ask, can I create a temporary reel? Speaking about your demo reel earlier?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you can create a temporary reel. And in fact, for those pay-to-play sites I mentioned, voices.com and Voice123, you have to have some sample of your work in order to join those. So until you get a little more experience under your belt, the dream is to be able to make your demo out of real live spots that you've done. And it's just an example of your work. But before then, many people create what we call like a fake demo reel, where you listen to commercials and you copy them down, or some people will try to write their own. I don't know if I recommend that, but you basically just compile scripts from a bunch of different commercials, record them on your own, but you want your demo reel to sound like real spots. You want music and sound effects and all that kind of a thing. But if you're just trying to join those pay-to-play sites, little sample clips of your voice and, reading, through some copy And copy is some jargon. That's what we call our scripts. Just to have an example until you can actually build up a full demo reel.
Gotcha. And because you work with 1099s, do you operate as a self-contractor, a company, an LLC, or do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't personally. I know a lot of people who do. It kind of depends on how much money you're making and what tax bracket you fall into, whether or not that is a wise thing to do. But I do know several actors who have incorporated, and they pay their taxes that way. So that's just a conversation to have with your tax people.
Of course, yes. And so finally, the question we will ask all of our speakers is, what advice do you have for someone trying to start out, or what's something they should avoid or should definitely do? How do they get started in all this?
Try everything. Study the thing that it is that you want to do. Like I was just saying, if you want to do animation, study cartoons. If you want to do audiobooks, listen to audiobooks. If you want to do commercials, watch commercial breaks. Take classes. Right now, we are very fortunate that classes from all around the world are available on your computer. So you can take classes from top New York teachers, actors, casting directors, agents, in your house, wherever you live. And that's how I got my start, was just classes, always learning, always learning.
And again, those classes you mentioned, what they were again?
Actors Connection is one studio that offers quite a variety of voiceover classes. And One-on-One has several more. To be perfectly honest, One-on-One's email list has gotten a little spammy recently. So just know that. But they do have some great classes. My favorite teacher there is Andy Roth. He teaches an amazing voiceover class.
All right. Well, check it out, guys. Andy Roth. Also, I just want to say thank you so much, Haley,
Thank you.
for spending time with us tonight. And everyone that came out, thank you so much for sitting and listening. I'm sure if you have any more questions, please feel free to send them to universitytheater@ncsu.edu. We'll be glad to pass those on and see if we can get those answered for you. I hope that you can join us this Thursday night when we have another speaker. Kara Harmon will be joining us, costume designer from New York City, and she'll be able to talk to us about how she approaches costume design. But Haley, again, thank you so much. We look forward to hearing from Nathan, your husband, and
yes,
in a couple of weeks, an actor. And again, thank you all.
Thank you guys so much. This has been such an honor. And go talk. Go make some money doing voiceover.
All right. Great night. Everybody, Zoom, bye-bye.
Bye.